What if I told you that history has been repeating the same mistake for over 2,000 years? Different empires, different rulers, different eras, yet every one of them followed the exact same path. They all believed they were too powerful to fail. They were all wrong. Rome, the Mongol Empire, the British Empire, the Soviet Union. They ruled millions, controlled vast territories, and shaped the course of human history. Yet despite their differences, they all shared the same fate: collapse. At first glance, these empires had nothing in common. They existed centuries apart. They spoke different languages. They followed different religions. They fought different wars. They were built by different leaders for different reasons. So how could they all end in almost exactly the same way? Was it bad leadership, economic collapse, endless wars, foreign invasions? Or was there something much deeper, a hidden pattern, one that history has repeated again and again? To find that answer, we have to go back to one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known: Rome. Rome wasn't built in a day, but it also didn't fall in one. For centuries, the Roman Empire stood as the greatest superpower the world had ever seen. Its roads stretched across continents. Its armies conquered kingdoms that once seemed impossible to defeat. Its laws shaped civilizations, and its influence can still be seen even today. To the people of Rome, their empire didn't just seem powerful, it seemed eternal. But beneath that image of strength, tiny cracks had already begun to appear. At first, they were almost impossible to notice. Corruption slowly spread through the government. Political power became a prize to fight over rather than a responsibility to protect. Emperors rose and fell with alarming speed. Civil wars weakened the empire from within. Meanwhile, Rome kept expanding. Every new conquest brought more land to defend, more soldiers to pay, and more pressure on an economy that was beginning to break. Higher taxes angered ordinary citizens. Inflation weakened the value of money. Loyalty slowly disappeared. By the time foreign invasions reached Rome's borders, the empire was already exhausted from fighting itself. And in 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire finally collapsed. But here's the surprising part. Rome wasn't destroyed in a single battle. It collapsed because years of small problems became one impossible problem. And history was only getting started. Nearly 8 centuries later, another empire rose to power, faster, larger, and more terrifying than anything the world had ever witnessed. The Mongol Empire, led by Genghis Khan. The Mongols built the largest contiguous land empire in human history. Their armies moved with incredible speed. Their tactics were decades ahead of their enemies. Kingdom after kingdom fell before them. At its peak, the Mongol Empire stretched from Eastern Europe all the way to the Pacific Ocean. It seemed unstoppable. But once again, the greatest threat didn't come from outside. It came from within. After Genghis Khan's death, the empire was divided among his descendants. Unity slowly disappeared. Rival leaders competed for power. Internal conflicts replaced expansion. The empire became too vast, too difficult, and too divided to govern as a single nation. Trade routes weakened. Regional rulers gained independence. And the empire that had once conquered half the known world slowly broke apart, not because it lacked strength, but because it could no longer hold itself together. And once again, history repeated the same pattern. Then came an empire unlike any before it. It didn't conquer the world on horseback. It ruled the oceans. At its height, the British Empire controlled nearly a quarter of the world's land and governed hundreds of millions of people. It became so vast that people famously said, "The sun never sets on the British Empire for a time." That seemed true. Britain dominated global trade, built the world's most powerful navy, and expanded its influence across every continent. But maintaining an empire of that size came at an enormous cost. Wars became increasingly expensive. Colonies demanded independence. Economic pressure continued to grow. And after 2 devastating world wars, Britain no longer had the resources to maintain its global dominance. One by one, its colonies gained independence. The empire didn't disappear overnight. It slowly dissolved until one day, the largest empire in history existed only in history books. Different century, different empire, the same story. By the 20th century, the world had changed. Kings had become politicians. Empires had become superpowers. But history hadn't changed at all. The Soviet Union controlled nearly 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. It possessed one of the world's largest armies. It competed with the United States in a global struggle that shaped the modern world. To millions of people, it looked unshakable. But beneath that image of power, the same warning signs were quietly returning. A struggling economy, political stagnation, growing public dissatisfaction, enormous military spending, and a system that could no longer adapt to change. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, not because it lost one decisive battle, but because years of pressure had finally reached a breaking point. Once again, the strongest walls had fallen from the inside. Rome, the Mongols, Britain, the Soviet Union. Different continents, different cultures, different centuries. Yet they all followed a remarkably similar path. First came rapid expansion, then overwhelming confidence. Success created complexity. Complexity created inefficiency. Corruption weakened institutions. Economic pressure began to grow. Internal divisions replaced unity. And by the time an external crisis arrived, the empire was already collapsing from within. The invasion, the war, or the economic crash was rarely the true cause. More often, it was simply the final push. History doesn't repeat itself because people are identical. It repeats because human nature rarely changes. Every empire believed it had solved the problems that destroyed those before it. Every empire believed this time would be different. None of them were right. Perhaps the greatest lesson history teaches us isn't how empires rise. It's how they slowly convince themselves that they can never fall. Because collapse doesn't begin when the first wall is breached. It begins the moment a civilization believes it has become untouchable. The names change, the flags change, the technology changes, but the pattern remains the same. So the next time you hear someone say, "This empire will last forever," remember, history has heard those words before.